Good evening, and our topics tonight. In the Middle East, the violence between Israel, Gaza and Lebanon intensifies. Global efforts to broker ceasefire talks face critical challenges. With over 43,700 dead in Gaza and Hezbollah's involvement deepening, the stakes are higher than ever in the region's escalating conflict. In Europe, on the 995th day of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, new tensions emerge as German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Russian President Vladimir Putin hold their first direct phone call in 2 years. Meanwhile, Russia tightens its control over energy supplies, and with winter approaching, Ukraine faces mounting challenges amid shifting global power dynamics. And at COP29, as it continues, global leaders are confronted with tough questions on climate action, with fossil fuel lobbying, hydrogen pledges and clean energy solutions taking center stage. Amid rising concerns, underrepresented countries are making their voices heard. But the key question remains, will the conference secure the billions needed to tackle the climate crisis? We're going to start tonight in the Middle East. Welcome to In Focus.
منطقة سكنية لا فيها أشياء عسكرية ولا فيها شيء. مثل أول شيء أنا عاجز ومن بدي أهرب.
In a country of that size, which is relatively small, and a population that's estimated around 5 million people, you can imagine how dramatic it is that over 1 million people are now without shelter and on the move.
The Guardian has reported that Israeli airstrikes on southern Beirut intensified this morning following evacuation orders issued by the Israeli military for Hezbollah-controlled areas. The strikes, particularly in Haret Harik, have led to widespread displacement, with many civilians initially being forced to leave the area before returning to check on their homes. Meanwhile, a senior Hamas official expressed readiness for a ceasefire in Gaza, urging US President-elect Donald Trump to pressure Israel to halt its military actions. Humanitarian conditions in Gaza continue to deteriorate, with aid access nearly impossible in some northern areas. In Lebanon, Israeli attacks led to significant casualties, including the deaths of 21 rescue workers. Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister is seeking Iran's assistance in brokering a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah. To provide some more analysis on the current escalations in the Middle East, joining us from Beirut is Khaled Zain El-Din, a political analyst specializing in international affairs and the editor-in-chief of the European Arab International newspaper. Thank you very much for being with us on the program. Welcome. So with Israeli airstrikes on multiple fronts now, do you believe that a ceasefire could be imminent?
Greetings, everybody. In fact, I mentioned before in a number of mass media means that we are not going to witness any ceasefire in Gaza. We haven't witnessed it in the past, and I don't think it will happen anytime soon, because Israel has not achieved its goals in Lebanon, and it's now utilizing or exploiting the opportunity of the American elections in order to further escalate or further pound additional areas And in order to target a lot of civilian venues, Israel has made the decision to dismantle the political and socio-economic and intelligence capacities of Hezbollah, as well their fiscal or financial capacities. And we have seen how Israel has been targeting healthcare organizations and the financial institutions affiliated with Hezbollah, and how it has assassinated the front line of Hezbollah chiefs. What Israel is doing now is to further expand the scope of the war, and of course Israel understands that there is a lot of discord between Lebanese parties. There are sects and parties that are pro-war and have some affinities with the resistance front, and as well others that have affinities with the Islamic State of Iran and Yemen and Iraq, and they understand all these discords inside Lebanon. Israel understands all that and is trying to exploit this for its own interests. And in fact, there has been an international support led by the United States to and supervisory of the international community led by the United States over the breaching of the treaty. And I know that we are going to witness further breaches and further assaults on educational and parliamentary and social institutions.
Okay.
And Israel is
I just want to interrupt you a second because let me just interrupt you a second. Just going back to Gaza for a moment. Given that Hamas has said that it's ready for a ceasefire, do I take it that you don't believe that pressure from the US could end this aggression by Israel in Gaza?
In fact, Hamas, regardless of its resilience for over a year, in the face of the Israeli aggression, Israel has been receiving a lot of financial and armed support. And in fact, this aggression resulted in the outbreak of a lot of casualties and a lot of starvation. And so Hamas understands that it is not feasible at all to expand the scope of this war. And Hamas understood now that there is a plan for a new Middle East, and in which Hamas is not going to be playing any kind of role. Hamas right now just has the only card, which is the card of hostages. And Israel, in fact, is more than ready to forsake its own hostages, because it understands that sacrificing 100 Israeli nationals is not so big when it comes to them achieving their goal or their dream of establishing a wide-scope Israeli state. And Hamas understands all of this, in fact, and Hamas does not have enough military capacities to prolong the war, and all these indicators prove that Hamas is not going to stay resilient forever. And before Donald Trump comes to the presidential office, Hamas wants to stop or halt the war because they understand that Donald Trump is going to expand or help Israel expand the war.
Now, there's talk of a US-Israel ceasefire proposal for Lebanon. What role do you think Hezbollah's approval might play in shaping the future, or the future of the conflict, or perhaps the end of the conflict?
Today, the conflict or the war is between Israel and Hezbollah. It has been, as I mentioned previously, targeting Hezbollah venues, and Hezbollah right now has the capacity to halt the war if it succumbed to Israelis' will and desires. Now we are witnessing the deployment of a lot of Israeli forces, or a lot of forces of different nationalities on the borders between Lebanon and Syria, in order to sever the support coming to the resistance. And unfortunately, I believe that we are going to witness more violence in Lebanon, and a lot more casualties are going to happen in Lebanon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we get the point of what you were saying there. Thank you very much, Khaled Zain El-Din, a political analyst specializing in international affairs and the editor-in-chief of the European Arab International newspaper, joining us from Beirut. Thank you very much indeed. Now, as for the Russia-Ukraine conflict, as it enters its 1,000th day shortly, new tensions and shifting alliances redefine the conflict's future. The United Nations has warned that renewed Russian strikes on Ukraine's energy infrastructure could trigger severe hardship this winter, potentially displacing millions more and exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The Moscow Times reported that with 65% of Ukraine's energy capacity destroyed, widespread power outages could leave millions without heating, water or electricity, particularly affecting those in urban high-rises. The situation is described as far worse than last winter, with emergency shelters struggling to meet basic needs. The UN is urgently calling for additional funding to support its $500 million winter aid plan, which remains underfunded by 50% as global contributions to Ukraine's humanitarian efforts continue to decline. Now, joining us from Moscow to talk more about the Russia-Ukraine war and also Trump's potential impact on it as well is Sergei Markov, who is a former advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Welcome to the program. Now, Mr. Markov, how do you assess what Chancellor Scholz has been saying and the fact that he's had a conversation with Putin? What does it mean for the trajectory of the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
I think telephone call of Olaf Scholz, Chancellor of Germany, to Vladimir Putin had no interest to put Ukrainian crisis to the peace. It's fully rooted in domestic politics of the Germany. Now, the popularity of Chancellor of Germany, his party, Social Democratic Party, is very, very low. It will be new elections on February 25th in Germany, and majority of people in Germany want Germany not to be involved in the Ukrainian war, and generally this war not continue but to be stopped. That's why Olaf Scholz just for to make a better image in the eyes of own voters, made such a telephone call to the Vladimir Putin. It's generally a positive signal, but very, very small signal. Also because we believe that it's not a Russian-Ukrainian war. It's Ukrainian war between Russia and NATO, led by United States of America. And to stop war, it should be peace deal between Russia and United States of America. It's only one way to the peace.
So, you think that Olaf Scholz, it's a domestic play for popularity, and by cozying up or having a conversation with, let's put it as it is, having a phone conversation with Vladimir Putin is going to make him more popular in his own country?
He will be more popular in his country. There are two parts of the German society. One is for supporting of the war, and they will vote for the Christian Democrats, who is main competitors to the Olaf Scholz, and a little bit for the Liberals and Green Party. And those who for peace, they voted for alternative for Germany and for the Sarah van der Necht Union. It's former members of Social Democrats. And Olaf Scholz, between them, he is on the 0 point. And to get more support from the voters, he has to choose some solutions. He tried to choose side of the war, and as a result, his popularity fully collapsed. Now his attempt to take the peace side. Probably, if his popularity will be increased because of this, he will continue such a calls. But also, it's good that Western leaders of the major Western countries, except maybe Hungarian Orban Prime Minister, but most of the other, they decided to have some kind of boycott to Vladimir Putin. And by telephone call to Vladimir Putin, Olaf Scholz, some kind of undermining this policy of boycott. It's positive signal.
And President Zelensky, he has called the phone call between Putin and Scholz opening Pandora's box. Do you think this might be the start of problems or fissures in between the relationship between Vladimir Zelensky and his European allies and partners?
I think Vladimir Zelensky paradoxically right. And by doing this telephone call, Olaf Scholz opened the box, but not Pandora, but I would say anti-Pandora box, because it's positive box for negotiation. It's absolutely clear to stop war. Everybody needs to have negotiation. Vladimir Zelensky denying to have negotiations. That's why Vladimir Zelensky only for continuation of war, which already killed more than half of the million Ukrainians. He's crazy, I think, from my point of view, and he's kind of maniac of war. And to stop this war, of course, we need negotiation. As to relation between Zelensky and European leaders, I don't think that these relations will decline. On contrary, I think the relation between Zelensky and European leaders will be improved, because Donald Trump will stop financing of the Ukrainian regime, and he will ask European leaders to take financial burden of the subsidizing of the Ukrainian regime. As a result, Europeans will have to pay more to the Ukrainian army than now.
And given Russia's demands for Kursk before negotiations, do you think Moscow is going to insist on territorial gains as a precondition for peace or even peace talks?
Russia president has some kind of dignity, and he also wants to show that Russia is in the strong position. Russia is winning this war. You know, one of the main reasons why Donald Trump decided to stop this Ukrainian war is because this America, Ukraine, European coalition is losing the war. If Russia losing the war, Donald Trump wouldn't stop the war. But they're losing. The result, and Russia now winning, and Russia is ceasing. But it's not only one. Russia strongly demands, first of all, demilitarization of Ukraine. It means that should be no military threat from Ukrainian territory, and also denazification. What is, for Russian point of view, means that system of terror in this terroristic regime in Ukraine should be kicked out, because European and American leaders directly, openly lying when they're talking about democracy in Ukraine. In Ukraine, not democracy, but anti-democracy. And Russia demand.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to stop you there because we're just out of time. But I thank you very much for coming on the program. That's the Russian view there. Sergei Markov, the Russian President Vladimir Putin's former advisor, joining us from Moscow. Thank you very much. Now, next, let's analyze the dynamics and show the most recent updates of COP29.
It gives me great pleasure to declare open the 29th session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change.
COP29 must tear down the walls of climate finance.
The Indian Express has reported that at COP29, China, India and other basic countries like Brazil and South Africa have voiced strong objections to the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM. They argue that CBAM unfairly targets developing nations by imposing trade restrictions, potentially harming multilateral cooperation. The EU introduced CBAM to address carbon emissions and prevent carbon leakage by taxing imports from countries with weaker climate policies. However, the nations I mentioned contended that it violates international trade and climate agreements, seeking to include discussions on these unilateral restrictive measures at COP29. Despite opposition, the EU denies any discriminatory intent, maintaining that CBAM is designed to encourage global climate action without disadvantaging specific nations. Now joining us on the program once again from Baku is Dr. Alet Sahan, a professor of environmental economics, to help us get through what's going on at COP29. We'll start. How do you view the influence of the fossil fuel lobbying at this particular COP? Especially there's over 1,700 lobbyists in attendance.
Well, as a matter of fact, yeah, this is true. There are many lobbyists against the use of fossil fuel in Baku at COP29. But I think at the end of the day, the decisions are made by the official delegations. They are influenced somehow by the presence of lobbyists and so on and so forth. But I think countries have their own agendas, and I think they would need to weigh in between the global agenda, climate action, versus national agendas. So I think this has to be weighed in when countries are meeting together to negotiate a new climate deal. I think the idea is, yes, lobbyists can have some impact on the final outcome of the COP, but at the end of the day, I think, as I said, I think at the end of the day, what would prevail is the national interest of countries. So, and we've always had this argument between, the global agenda versus national agenda. So let's see how this is going to be played out within the next few days.
Hydrogen expansion pledges seem to be taking a centre stage. Could this transition realistically accelerate the shift away from fossil fuels?
Absolutely, but however, this is not like kind of a blank check. If we, let's go all for green hydrogen. The idea is, unless this is accompanied by some sort of technical assistance, and it's not like we know when you say adoption of a new technology in developing countries to make them more like move into renewable energy and new kinds of energy sources like green hydrogen. I think it's not just adoption. I think it's also adapting how these countries can adapt the new technologies to suit their own needs and the situation on the ground. So I think the idea is the North, the advanced countries have the technology for green hydrogen. So if we would like to encourage and promote green hydrogen, especially with the developing world, I think the idea is we need to provide the incentives, because it is costly to basically to have the technology to do the green hydrogen production, and also we need the technical assistance. So I think if we are really thinking very strategically about making green hydrogen, as I would say the solution, but one of the major solutions going forward for climate action, I think this has to be this has to be thought of very in a very clear way and very clear manner, is how are we going to incentivize developing countries to be able to subscribe to this new technology.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alet Sahan, joining us from COP29 in Baku, Professor of Environmental Economics. Thank you very much for being on the program. And that's all for In Focus today. Thanks very much for watching, and stay tuned for more updates right here on Q News.